The focus for me has been on not tying myself to one role, one skill set, one career path, because I don't see a future with AI that's possible. I don't think I'll be able to earn a living by doing that. And I haven't thought that for quite a few years now.
Welcome to the AI for Creative Entrepreneurs podcast, where we guide you through the fascinating and often frightening landscape of artificial intelligence. I'm Rob Marsh.
And I'm Kira Hug. We're the founders of the Copywriter Club, and our goal is to help you stay ahead of the curve. We'll show you how to use these new AI tools to maximize your creativity, simplify your work and life, and reinvent your creative career so AI works for you, not against you.
So whether you are a copywriter, a marketer, a creative professional of any kind, join us as we explore the intersection of AI, creativity, and career. Am I obsolete? That's the question that many of us have asked recently, thanks to the fast-paced innovations that AI is delivering, which makes us wonder how we can become more adaptable in our careers so that we don't become redundant, even if our jobs do. Today's guest for the AI for Creatives Entrepreneur podcast is Brandon Burton. And Brandon talks about how he's adapting to the changing landscape of AI, recognizing the need for flexibility and adaptability in a future where AI continues to shape our world. Brandon's not only the producer of this show and a member of our team, but he's also many other things that we talk about in this episode, including a self-described tech nerd. So he's been keeping up with the latest developments in AI and its impact on various aspects of our lives over the past couple of years. Join us as we explore how AI is no longer science fiction, but a reality that we need to navigate a bit more carefully.
But before we get to the interview, this episode is sponsored by our free AI Copywriting 5-Day Challenge, which kicks off on April 26th. You can join the two of us, and a community of copywriters and creatives so we can figure this out together, experiment with ChatGPT in creative and fun new ways. So working with you becomes a no-brainer for your clients, and they can see the value that you're putting into your projects. So you can sign up for this challenge. Again, it's free over at thecopywriterclub.com/AI challenge.
Okay, let's kick off this interview with Brandon.
All right, Brandon, why don't we just kick off and talk about how you ended up getting into AI? What was your entry point?
Growing up, my dad had his own IT company. So my house had like more computers in it than my school. So he was always building things and solving problems with technology. So that was kind of normalized for me at a pretty young age. I consider myself a bit of a nerd, but I've got brothers and I'm comfortably the least nerdy out of all four of us. So
Really?
yeah, they're gonna hate me now.
So should we be talking to one of your brothers today? Is that what you're saying?
At least two of them would make a far better guess than me. But yeah, AI's always fascinated me. But I suppose for a long time it felt like it was sci-fi more than anything else. And then in 2017 I started a fiction book that featured artificial intelligence quite heavily. And that's when I first bumped into futurists online. And I remember one of them saying to me that the three biggest issues of our time are the growing inequality between people, the climate emergency, and artificial intelligence. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized how AI was definitely not science fiction anymore. And because I'm kind of wired to look at most things through the lens of what next, or maybe more specifically, how much will this impact my kids? Those few months definitely shaped me as a person. I think the stage we're at now, where AI is central to anything that we want to try and achieve, that's been kind of front of mind for me for, I'd say, the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
So let's talk just a little bit deeper about that. AI being central to what we want to do or achieve.
Uh-huh.
That's really only become the case since ChatGPT has become more popular. At least that's the way we think about it. But the truth is, we've been using AI for a lot of things. Netflix runs on kind of an AI algorithm. Siri and Hey Google and Alexa all are AI driven, at least at some point. But maybe talk a little bit more about where you see it showing up in our lives, because it's not just the last 3 months that everybody's been so excited about it.
I definitely agree. It is everywhere, and it has been everywhere for a while. And I think if we step back as consumers and users of this technology, and then we look at how like big companies are using it, how corporations are using it, how governments are using it, this is a force that's been around and it's definitely here to stay. I think that while we're comfortable with the idea of what it's capable of, I think we're still coming to terms with the impact of what that means and how we've got to this place. And like I say, what the next steps are and how we navigate those, which I think is like the bit most people are nervous about, no matter how much they know about AI or not.
So you've been pretty deep in this for you said 7 years?
Since 2017, so that's, yeah, 6 years now, yeah.
Okay, so what does that look like for you behind the scenes when you are awakened to this and you're like, this is a big deal? Are you pulling this into client projects and into your jobs and work? Are you just kind of reading as much as you can to understand the landscape? What does that look like over the last 6 years?
Most of the time I've been trying to stay up to date with it. So reading, following other people's journeys. I think, like Rob mentioned, a big part of AI is that it hasn't necessarily been hugely accessible for a lot of the time. But one thing that we've known is that it's an inevitable technology. And probably more importantly, we know how it's impacting the marketplace, how it's impacting the job market. For me, since 2017, and again, looking through the lens of like how this impacts my kids, the focus for me has been on remaining adaptable, in not tying myself to one role, one skill set, one career path, because I don't see a future with AI that's possible where we can put ourselves in a box and decide that's who we are. I don't think I'll be able to earn a living by doing that, and I haven't thought that for quite a few years now.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about some of the tools and the things that you're doing with the work that you do,
Mhm.
knowing that it's not tied to necessarily one thing only, but yeah, give us just kind of a landscape of the different kinds of tools that you have been playing with, experimenting with, even using to write, to produce. Like you produce this show for us, so there's a bunch of them. Like give us a little bit of a rundown on them.
Yeah, so I haven't used AI for writing tools massively. I think up until I would even say GPT-4, I wouldn't have used them as part of my process for writing. For ideation, for research, certainly, but for writing, I haven't wanted to, and I also haven't found that it was useful. I've experimented with Copy.ai, Jasper. I've spent a lot of time with another tool called Phrase, which used to have its own AI model, which is what attracted me to it, and then now uses ChatGPT as well. Um, I've been a channel partner for writer.com for the last 11 months, 12 months. The work I do is predominantly around brand voice for teams. And the first time I came across that, and this was before they started using AI, I just thought it was incredible. I was trying to build a brand voice tool for about a year. And when I came into that, I just gave up and I thought this is this is the direction I need to go in. And it's that kind of thing that I've realized happens more and more to us now, especially as creators, especially as entrepreneurs, that we have to be able to just like kill our darlings effectively or move on from tools and ideas because AI is happening that quickly. Outside of writing, I use a tool called Vowel quite a lot. Vowel is like a meeting platform, so you'd think of it as a replacement for Zoom. While you're having your meeting, you have your agenda run alongside it. It transcribes it. It fills in automatically any action points that you discuss. You can kind of divvy them out to other people as well in your team. So there's a lot you can do with tools like that. I'm experimenting with a tool called 11 Labs at the moment, which does text to speech. Basically, I've got my own podcast and I'm like the biggest bottleneck to production. So I'm just trying to find ways around me not having to speak. That might not work, but I enjoy diving into things like that. Um, I use a Google plugin called Bias Checker. That might be what I've named it actually, but it's a bias checker, and it's a chat GPT extension. You can load any article into it. It shows you where an article is unbalanced or where certain bits have been sensationalized. I think for research, particularly now, it's important to be able to remove opinion and bias, and I found that extremely helpful. I'm working on a client project at the moment with a tool called Chatbase. Chatbase is basically a chatbot you can install on a site where customers can then answer questions based on the information across the entire website, which is a cool tool. And then for production of this podcast, I use tools like Descript. tools like Swell AI, just around transcribing, editing, summaries, things that I wouldn't have been able to do personally, but certainly wouldn't have been able to do within a time frame, now feel more manageable. There's a learning curve to them, but you kind of put yourself in a position where you know once you can adapt to these tools, you will be able to save time. So I'm kind of in that process at the moment. I'd say aside from that, I've probably experimented with like, I don't know, maybe 50 tools. There are dozens of tools with a lot of potential that are built in with AI, but some of them are extremely impressive, but wouldn't necessarily replace what we use now while they're being built. I know a lot of people have experimented with like Mem AI, which is a really promising tool. I'd say for most people who already use note-taking apps like Obsidian or Roam, they probably wouldn't find that it's worth the jump yet, just because there's features it doesn't have, or it maybe isn't as consistent. But we can already see like where these things are going. And I'd even say apps like Canva, where they've already decided how they're adapting AI into their process, are probably some of the ones that I'm looking out for more now, because if they're already part of a workflow and they're already conscious of how much AI is impacting some of the work that we do, I'm excited to see what existing tools do with AI.
Okay. One of the many things I love about you, Brandon, is that you are super nerdy and that you just spouted off like 20 different tools.
You're saying that as a compliment, right?
Of
Yes.
course. Of
I'll take it
course.
either way, it's fine.
Of course. I think it's fantastic. Two follow-up questions. So you just, again, listed all these tools that you're using. I think someone who might be completely new to the space could feel overwhelmed, but we'll talk about that in a second. But the first piece is, what has been the impact for you as you use these tools with your clients, with the work you're doing with the Copywriter Club, with your own podcast? Like, can you describe some of the specific benefits from those tools?
I think most of them at the moment are still around possibility. So you can look at a current workflow or an output or a deliverable, and then you can look at what's possible with some of these tools. So before I started using Writer, I was like trying to cobble together different people on Fiverr to build these like small extensions that I could use for brand voice, knowing the limitations of where that would take me, not just with my budget, but just with what I thought was possible. Writer changes that completely. Tools like Descript, I tried editing video before and I was okay at it. Descript gives more options around that, accelerates that process, adds more tools to my arsenal. From a client perspective, really a lot of the time it's around what that overall package looks like. When I'm thinking about staying adaptable and like working with clients and being more embedded in their business, it's about what more and what larger challenges and what bigger projects can we take on, and what are like the other sides of their business that aren't necessarily using AI at the moment but can do. When I first discovered 11 Labs, I reached out to a client from ages ago and just said, look, this could help you. It's text to speech, it's relatively cheap, and I knew the use case it would work for. So I think a lot of the time it's just where these tools could already fit into workflows as opposed to what new thing can I create with it. Because again, one, some of the tools aren't maybe mature enough to create new offers from, and I don't think that's a problem. I think we're just 6 months away from some of those things happening. And then two, we already have developed skill sets and things that we really like to do, and the onus should be on us as creatives to find ways that AI can help us as opposed to shifting to like completely new work.
And as just a follow-up to that, I think it's so smart to introduce tools to past clients. Like, we're always looking for ways to connect to past clients to book more work. And if you are staying relatively up to date on a couple tools, it doesn't have to be every single tool. It gives you the ability to go back to old clients and say, hey, here's something that you probably haven't heard of yet. Here's how you use it. I think it could help you. Then you get plugged back into that project. So smart.
Yeah, I think there's copywriters and creatives who will benefit from that. I'd say way more than I have, just because of the style of work they do and the type of work they do. I like working with single clients for kind of long periods of time, and so I haven't had loads of opportunities to do that. But yeah, I would definitely agree that that's something that as people kind of dive into new tools and discover them, they can really look around and think, okay, where would that have benefited other people before? Because there's huge opportunity there for sure.
So you mentioned that list of tools. I'm curious specifically how those tools are impacting your business. What are some of the surprises that you're seeing, or some maybe unique or different ways that you're using it to save time, have more ideas? How are you using them?
So I would say that I'm using them to save time in the long run, to allow me to build larger, more complex packages that I feel confident I can manage. and I'm using them more around, because I do feel like I've been in this space for a while, or at least been experimenting with these tools for a while, where I know it's a value add for clients. This isn't like, do I think this is something they're already doing? It's, I know there's an opportunity here. And I don't think that we're kind of towards the end of that. I think we'll always be in a space where, if we're trying to be at the forefront of some of these technologies and these tools, that we'll always be in a position not just to execute in other people's businesses or to solve problems, but to give new direction and to create new solutions. So for me, it's been around that. It's been, where can I stay competitive? Where can I offer solutions other people can't? Where can I, if not accelerate my process, because I haven't found that to be the case so far, but I can include more in what I'm doing. I think that's where some of the magic has been. Descript, for example, is a perfect one, because editing video isn't quicker, but is probably of a higher quality now than it was before, and then will be quicker as I get more used to the tool. Writer.com and eventually Mem, once it's kind of ironed out a few things, is a game changer for brand voice. And obviously this is without talking about ChatGPT and the near infinite ways that we can kind of implement that. But yeah, I think it's more about, where are the opportunities, and then who are the people that need those solutions, and where's the gap between what they're currently paying or currently needing, and what's possible.
How has all of this changed the way that you look at yourself as, business owner, service provider, creative? How has it changed the way you talk about what you do and position yourself, whether it's in your marketing or it's like, just on a sales call?
It probably hasn't changed enough, and I say that because I'm not sure that I ever felt like wedded to any particular job title. So I don't know if I ever considered myself like a copywriter for life, or a digital marketer, or a brand strategist, because I saw these as like different skill sets worth building on that businesses need. And I think I've always positioned myself as like a partner, and these are the skills, and this is the kind of angle that I come from. I like to stay on top of technology. I like to bring insights from around that. I consider myself a futurist. I consider myself someone who is looking for that competitive edge, and is often around software and technology. So I don't know if that's changed. I would say that, particularly maybe 18 months, a year ago, when I first started working with some of the tools that were serious about building AI into it, I don't think I made the jump quick enough to think, actually, this is a way to position myself. One, because a lot of people didn't necessarily see the value in AI. I don't think it was something that people took seriously, and I don't blame them. A lot of the tools weren't to be taken seriously necessarily, and also because it hadn't necessarily crossed with the work I was actively doing. And like I say, I think that changed a lot when Writer came out, because that's when I realized that there was like a massive shift in what we could do on our own with the tools and the resources that we had, and what we could do once things are AI powered. And I think that's the first time I changed my LinkedIn profile to be like AI tools and softwares that kind of
Wait, what is your
help you stay
LinkedIn
on this.
profile? What does your
Oh,
LinkedIn profile say?
I've changed it again, so I'm not even sure. But I know on my banner it was I think the first time I changed it was to say something around AI. Yeah.
So he's taken it off, though, because so many people now have added it to their profile that Brandon is now standing out by not having it on his profile.
Are you making fun of me, Rob? Because I added
Yes,
it.
I am.
I'm part of the fad.
So there is an element of that, and I think that's like I am wired that way, to think that, like, if that's no longer a competitive edge, then where is? If the whole world is moving towards AI, then where are the opportunities that sit underneath it and before it?
Okay, I found your LinkedIn profile. It says you're a messaging strategist plus AI copywriter. There we go. It's still there. I'm glad it's still there.
It's still there.
Time to change it, Brandon.
No doubt.
Get away from the hordes. So obviously you're very bullish on a lot of these tools, and we can talk more deeply about like how we're using them, especially, as you're producing our podcast and those kinds of things. But I'm curious, it's not all there yet. Where are the gaps that you see, like as you lean into something like using Canva to create art, where it will create 50 options literally in seconds from an uploaded document or whatever? Like, where are the problems, the things that we need to look out for? Maybe they'll be resolved in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe not, but yeah, where are the holes?
So yeah, I do think that most of the problems will be resolved in like the short, medium term. I think the gaps are more in how they're positioned. So you can take certain tools and they'll position themselves as being able to replace parts of your workflow or even members of your team. And I don't think that's accurate. And not from a technology perspective, more from like a user experience perspective, if you're not experienced with certain tools, it doesn't matter how good they are. There's still a gap between being able to like access it and then use it. And I think what we're seeing, and we've already seen, is creative work being replaced by non-creatives who are using these tools to create subpar work, and these are on top of some really incredible tools. So I think that gap will probably exist long term. I think a lot of it is just that we haven't caught up. There are certain tools that are extremely capable, but they just haven't been built upon. They're trying to keep up with what's happening, especially with OpenAI, and as a result, other parts of the app don't work as well. So I can see certain apps replacing apps that we use now. But I think the gap is just in user experience, is in like it's just in general quality. I don't think it's anything to do with artificial intelligence, and that's why, yeah, it's got to be a short term problem. I think every time that OpenAI have announced something new, they've allowed people to build plugins or they've created their own API that people can access. I think we've seen like rushes of people trying to build apps around that, functional apps, but maybe not apps that you would use if you're already doing that work. And I think that's where the gap is still for us as entrepreneurs, as creatives, that we can show value of work as opposed to just the idea of an output. We can actually deliver something consistently.
So this is a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned the way that tools are positioned.
Mm.
So I just went through 93 writing tools, AI writing tools. So not even all of the AI tools out there, but just the ones focused for copywriters, to put together the toolkit that we added to our AI for Copywriters course/adventure. But as I went through those, positioning for AI tools for writers is a huge problem. All of them, not all of them, 95% of them say helps you write 10 times faster. It's literally the same positioning across the board.
Yeah.
So this isn't really a question. This is just something that like I've been thinking about. If there's a copywriter out there, an AI copywriter out there who can help these guys position their tools in a way that they stand out from the rest, there's going to be some massive wins out there. And there's a lot of work that has to be done because it is hard to differentiate something when there's so many tools that all come to market at the same time doing the same thing. Kira, you'll like this. One of the ones that I think is most differentiated, although I can't figure out why, is a writing tool called Veg. I think it's Veg 3. It's a vegan AI writing tool.
I'm in.
But I'm not sure how you make AI vegan because it's not like the rest of the tools eat meat. But as I saw it, I thought, well, at least they're standing out in some way that's totally
That's
unique and
awesome.
different from everybody else who's saying write emails 10 times faster or write more blog posts, right? So I don't know if you got thoughts on that, Brennan. Maybe this is just like a segment on the podcast. It's called Rob's Tangent, and we just leave it there. But yeah, it's driving me crazy that nobody knows how to talk about this stuff in a way that differentiates.
No, I think first of all, I think that segment we should have regularly. I follow a lot of these newer apps on Twitter, or I find them on AppSumo or Product Hunt, and I recognize what they're doing, and I can see some of these people have developed an app because they're developers by nature, but they haven't marketed, they haven't positioned it, they haven't tried to differentiate it. And there is an opportunity to kind of get away with that at the moment because these things are new and they're exciting. And you can come across one and it might be like the other three, but you pick the one that you saw first or the one that's the cheapest price point. But especially for people who are in adjacent fields like ourselves, yeah, that's a huge opportunity because every time I'm talking to these businesses, like the tool I mentioned earlier, I was on a call with one of the people in their product team and they had very little awareness of the market or their competitors or what the technology allowed them to do, that they just knew that they were leveraging AI. And I think that there's, as we know, as marketers, a much bigger opportunity for them to talk about what they do. So yeah, I agree with you, Rob. I think that's where if we do see ourselves and parts of our workflow and parts of what the work we do being like under fire, I think that's a huge opportunity for us to go out and say, actually, here's where we can kind of work within this AI industry as it grows.
So there's a potential client list for somebody who
For
is
me.
in the AI for Copywriters course who can then, go pitch those clients.
I'm going
Yeah.
after it. I'm going to go after it. So yeah, we need to race. Brandon, have you pitched any of them yet?
I've not seen the list, but I've pitched
No, but
other
the tools
people.
that
Yeah.
the tools you're talking about, have you started pitching them as you're tinkering with the tools?
Yeah, honestly, that's kind of my process at the moment
Yep.
is fall in love with a tool, recognize where they can improve their marketing, and then because I already like the tool, it's relatively easy to go after them. Yeah.
All right. So I'll just reach out to the same ones and I'll be like, listen, just don't just ignore Brandon. Listen to me. You and I should work together.
If it's not you, it's
I'm
someone
just
else. So
kidding.
yeah.
I'm just kidding. So you mentioned earlier that you want to be adaptable, and these aren't your exact words, but how you're approaching your business and your career so that you are adaptable, because there's no one set career path anymore. So like, what does that actually mean to you? What does that look like specifically as far as what you have done previously or what you're doing now?
So I think as an example, like I've done different roles within the Copywriter Club, right? Or I've at least taken on different tasks and projects. I didn't think I'd ever end up in a place where I was editing and trying to produce a YouTube show. But for me, it's important that like when these things come up, that there's very few things that I will rule out right now and say I'm not going to do in the future. There are a couple, but there's very few of those. And I think for me, it's more important that I'm working with the right clients and the right businesses. Yeah, I think I wouldn't say I've done everything, but I've done a lot of different projects within marketing. I've done like chatbots and VSLs and really weird sequences, and I've done websites and ads, and like, I've done as much as I can, because I think more of us are recognizing now that it's hard, or it will be hard, to just be an expert in one area. That's quite a vulnerable stage to be in. I think it's more important to have a wide range of skills that business owners can trust you to execute on, or that you can, create custom packages based on different levels of experience and different tools and different things like that.
So Brandon, a lot of what we've talked about, like you are bringing your expertise to the table as someone who's been pretty deep in this for 6+ years now. But for many people listening, it's brand new and it's overwhelming. So what is your advice for a copywriter or creative who's listening and is like, I'm here, I'm open, but I just need to figure out how to start?
I'd say when I first got into copywriting, I saw people studying old books and like rewriting copy and building swipe files and like finding every possible way to get the reps in. And I think most people would say that's what it takes. And I think that level of interest, even obsession, is mandatory with AI. I think if we're not spending like a significant amount of our time and resources on building cutting edge AI into our workflows, then like the legacy skills that we have won't count for much. On the flip side though, I think AI is a great leveler. So finding new and innovative ways to do things without AI, or to combine other abilities, feels like a real opportunity. I know you guys teach people how to lean into their X factor, and I think that will continue to be as important as ever. Like, how are you uniquely able to solve a problem or create something from scratch? Like, what do you bring to the table that another creative with access to AI doesn't? Yeah.
So I keep coming back to the tools, and maybe that's a different discussion. I don't know, but I'm really curious about the specific tools you're using to produce our podcast, maybe your podcast, and what they're doing to help you with either the process or save time or what. Would you mind walking us through what you're doing with that stuff?
Yeah, of course. So I use AI tools and non-AI tools. I'm kind of at the point where I'm trying not to go all in on AI with everything I do, because I'm wary of how much that process can be replicated by anyone, anywhere, as these tools develop. So I still use iMovie as well as Descript when I'm editing the podcast. When you guys first came up with the idea for the podcast and we were looking at music for it, Kira suggested having the music created by AI. Originally, we wanted the artwork created by AI. So we use AI tools for that. I used a tool called Beat Oven for the music, which in all honesty wasn't
Which
great.
is basically Beethoven,
Yeah.
right? Or beat of it. Yeah.
I've been calling it Beethoven this whole time, and then I realized that's not how you spell Beethoven. So yeah. But yeah, so we use that, which is good. It's not that is nowhere close to replacing human creators, musicians, but it's better than I could have done. You tinker with it for a while, you figure out what works and what doesn't, you keep trying, and eventually you end up with something that can work. It's the same with the artwork as well. I'd say from when we first started using it to now, Mid-Journey version 5's come out, DALL-E 2, the access to that's a lot better. But the versions that we kind of tried to do, they weren't great. And actually, as we launched the podcast, as Kira discovered, everyone was using similar artwork to the ones that we would have created with that. So I think there are times when AI is really helpful for a workflow, and there's times when it doesn't really add anything unique or anything creative in that sense. But yeah, I think the main tool I use at the moment is Descript. Descript allows you to grab a transcript. It allows you to remove filler words, although that process isn't perfect sometimes. And you'll even see it in some of the episodes where some of the cutoffs aren't perfect. You can edit the entire video by text. So I could say a word and I can just delete that text, and that will then delete it from the audio and the visual as well. It's meant to make the process faster. I haven't found that it does, because you're consistently battling with the fact that AI is good but not great. So then you're going in and amending it anyway to where you think it's going to be better. And so, yeah, in that sense, I mean, the only reason I even looked at Descript was because iMovie doesn't handle 3 people. And if it did, I'd probably still be using iMovie, or I wouldn't have found the reason to jump to Descript. So there's an area of like adapting to these tools and then figuring out how they work and including them in the workflow. But also for me, not forcing it, because I'm not like really hungry to become a creative who uses AI. I just want to create the best output in the best way. And sometimes AI is that, and other times it isn't yet.
I can't wait till you can just clone us, so we don't even have to be on the show anymore.
Kira, we can do that.
And we were like, actually, it hasn't been the 2 of us the whole time. It's just been our AI clone.
I think my AI clone needs like a little bit more color.
Needs to shave?
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe
No.
darker beard so it doesn't look so old. I don't know.
Okay, so what has surprised you the most, again, as you're experimenting, learning, launching our show, producing? Like, has anything surprised you along the way?
I think the thing that surprised me is how many tools are now coming out that make podcasting, in theory, quicker, easier, better quality if you're not seasoned professionals like you guys. Like, I brought out a podcast a couple of months back and struggled with certain parts of the workflow to make it so I could do it every week, and found certain parts of it challenging. And this week I'm revisiting that because I know that certain things I picked up in this process, I can make my job a little bit easier, particularly around video podcasts, which I think for me would be the only way to create a podcast now in 2023. If it's a brand new podcast, to start with video, because there isn't much of a delay in like getting the work out. And that's going to improve dramatically, I think, over the next few years. I think something else that surprised me has been, which again probably won't last for long, but how relatively affordable a lot of the tools are that we can use. So I'd kind of challenge myself to pick up free trials or to do stuff that's free, because the whole point for me, and then for clients I want to work with, is how do I demonstrate that this is not something that there's a barrier to. But even with a limited budget, most of these tools, you would pay for them for the benefit that they give you. I don't imagine for the best ones that will last forever. And I think that's another thing that we have to be wary of as we jump into AI is, if I go all in on AI, is this something that I'll be able to keep up and pay for long term? And in some cases it will be, but I think in some cases we can already see business models that probably aren't sustainable, and they're building user bases and they're building technology, and then eventually we're looking at who can afford access to these tools. And I think that's another uncomfortable reality when it comes to AI as a creative force, is how much is our creativity limited by our budget, which shouldn't always be the case, but I think will continue to like cause some problems. Even if you look at ChatGPT, I wouldn't have said until GPT-4 there was any real reason to upgrade. I don't think any of us needed to be online all the time, but there's certain things that you can do with GPT-4 in ChatGPT that you can't do with the older models. And even now, that might not hurt a lot of us, but that's only going to grow. And you'd only imagine that the costs will go up, or different tiers will go up, and they've brought out different plugins which make different processes super quick and super easy, or will do. But then there's a barrier to access which doesn't exist with some of the standard tools that we'll just use now. So I think that's something to be wary of. But I've mainly been surprised at how much of a learning curve goes into trying to save time. So I'm probably spending more time because my eventual goal is to save time, but that hasn't been the case so far.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I've seen as well. I think it does save time with research and analysis type tasks, but as far as creative tasks, there's less saving of time, and it's more about a back and forth until you perfect or you get the thing that you want. That's been a real similar experience. So I'm sure that we're going to do an entire episode at some point about this, but what about some of the risks? Do you worry, Brennan, that having your face, your voice out there now easily cloned by AI and used by scammers to, approach family members for money? We're starting to see some of this stuff happen. Do
Yeah.
you worry about that at all? And is there anything we can do other than not being online all the time to prevent that kind of stuff?
So
You have a safe word to share with your family. Yeah. If there's, with all that kind of stuff.
I probably should, and that kind of stuff. So that isn't the kind of stuff that worries me currently, and I suppose it should. I think if it was something that I wrote and that was up for debate, or if someone could impersonate my identity, yeah. I think some of the bigger challenges are, well, not necessarily the bigger challenges. I think the challenges that we face, it feels like we're currently, as creatives, as entrepreneurs, on the front line. And I don't mean that to sound like there's like this huge friction between us and what AI does, but we're like the experiment into how much we're all willing to value AI's contribution, or how comfortable we are with human work being replaced. Um, and at the moment, I feel like both of them are completely up to us. You could look at farming and factories and retail and trucking, but this is our turn right now. I suppose we're like the guinea pigs for a lot of industries, um, and how we navigate AI in the creative space, what we deem as acceptable. That feels like the blueprint for how much artificial intelligence as a technology will dominate other industries as well. So I more feel that we kind of have that responsibility to look at it that way. I know that there's like, for example, I've seen people refuse to use Midjourney or DALI just because it uses images from other artists. And then that kind of pressure means that like companies like Adobe, they will commit to not using images from other artists in their models. So that kind of trajectory, you can see how that can impact industries as a whole. I feel like that's where some of the risks are, is what do we allow companies to do in the name of making things a little bit quicker, or in terms of like giving everyone access to something. I think that's where some of the responsibility lies on us, because when it's not our turn, we'll look at other things and we'll think, how did that happen, or why is this happening? But right now we have some control over what we allow to do, especially as creatives, because we are the ones who dictate, as much as we think our clients do and like other people do, we're the ones who dictate what quality is or what it looks like, or we're able to push that frontier a little bit more. So I think that's where we have a little bit of responsibility.
Okay, I have final question. So what else worries you in addition to that? I mean, I know you mentioned you think about your children and their future. So what other concerns do you have when you think about them? And then to end on a positive note, what excites you about where AI is going?
Yeah, I'd say from when I first really realized again that AI wasn't science fiction, that this was happening, that this was already happening and all around us. And you look into kind of what they expect it to look like. I don't think there's ever been a point where we've been guessing or we've been thinking what could happen. We've known that this was inevitable. We've known that this is the path that we're on. Recently, I remember when GPT-4 was rumored and then when it was announced, I felt genuinely worried. Every company working on AI is focused on building AGI, so artificial general intelligence. And that's the tech I feel that we're not ready for at a societal level. One of the things that AGI will be able to do is work across different disciplines while understanding them all. And outside of ChatGPT, GPT-4 is multimodal, meaning it can understand images and audio and video. That's a step closer to general intelligence, and that's happening a lot quicker than I think we thought. I think if we can catch up, AGI acting with human level intelligence is a major benefit to the world. We can do a lot with that, but I don't know if we've kind of done the work to keep up with that. I think we're at like this crucial crossroads between a global transformation or ascension, if that's a word you use, and like the worst case scenario or a million different worst case scenarios. AI is basically computing power and data. And there's companies like Alphabet, Google's parent company. There's companies like Amazon. There's a couple of Chinese companies who have plenty of computing power and data. And they've been working on government contracts and private projects for years, decades. For me, it's like AI is on the same level as nuclear power and the internet and the industrial revolution and the space race. And we, even in our industry now, we're at one of those points that decides which way that goes. I feel like what we do now, how we self-police our own actions, how we put pressure on other companies, will matter for years to come. But on a positive note, because I know that's where we, on a positive note,
We gotta end on a positive note.
I might take an entirely negative direction though, Brandon, because I mean, I love that you're positive about this,
yeah,
and we will have an
Right, was
episode at
that
some
positive?
point.
Was that
Well,
positive?
well, no, I think it is positive, but at some future episode, we're going to talk about some of the very scary negatives, and
hmm
people like Eli Yudkowsky and some of the things that they're
yeah,
saying about the potentials here, because
yeah,
yes, it could be transformative in a very good way for us, but like Eli says, it's mass extinction, right? Like somewhere,
definitely,
hopefully, we land somewhere closer to the happy end of that. But there are definitely some risks here. In the short term, they're amazing tools. AGI, I think maybe we should slow down a little bit on, but who knows? Yeah, go ahead now. Take it in a positive direction, and we can close.
So I think a lot of the positives are tied to some of the stuff we spoke about, but I don't think there's a middle ground. I think we either end up in borderline utopia, in this place that we can barely imagine because we've never really had access to some of this stuff before, or mass extinction seems like the alternative. I don't really know what the middle ground is, and that isn't to sound worrying. I consider myself a techno optimist. That sounded really negative. I'm kind of the opinion that like the sum total of humanity is good, and if we're able to democratize some of these tools and open them up and understand them and educate each other better around them and make them normal and parts of our daily lives and create barriers around them and make them safer, then the upsides are it's crazy. We can do almost any, like whatever human minds can achieve, AGI models can achieve quicker individually, and if they're built right, without bias, without as much bias, without agendas. I just think that again, it's society that has to catch up. We don't live in a world that rewards some of the things that we want AI to produce. We live in a world that, we're looking for more money and more resources and more ownership. And that mix of AI is, yeah, that's the thing that I lose sleep over for sure. That wasn't
So
positive either.
that wasn't, and we're almost out of time, so we're running out of time for positivity.
I'm excited about the opportunities that will be available to my kids. I'm
Yeah.
excited about the fact that the job market won't restrict them, that they won't have to go down one path in order to earn enough money to eat, that they won't have less options, that they should have more, if not infinite. I'm excited by the idea that if we get it right, if we have an ascension as a species, as a planet, that's what AI brings us. And that's that. There isn't anything more exciting than that.
Nailed it. All right. Brandon, where can our listeners go to connect with you?
So yeah, you can connect with me on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn at Mr. Brandon Burton, or you can find me at mrbrandonburton.com.
Before we wrap, I'm curious, Rob, did you have any takeaways from this conversation?
Yeah, lots of takeaways, but I'm just going to name one. And Brandon mentioned that he's surprised by how much of a learning curve goes into learning these tools and actually trying to save time. And this is a pattern we're starting to see with a couple of people that we've talked to. First with Sam, when Sam mentioned that he doesn't actually save time with AI tools, that really it's helping him iterate and ideate better, be more creative, but it's less about saving time. And then when we talked with Brad, Brad's used it actually to save time so that he can help serve a ton of clients a lot faster, like dozens of clients a week. So there's kind of a little bit of a tension here. My experience has been a little bit more like Brandon's, where there's a learning curve. I think there's a lot of efficiencies that we get, but it's not necessarily time savings.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I like that we talked about and highlighted the opportunity here for all copywriters. I know it got me excited. I know Brandon's already doing it as far as pitching these AI companies. Because you mentioned, the positioning it all sounds the same. The messaging all sounds the same for the most part with hundreds of companies. So this is an opportunity for anyone who might want to pivot or just try something new or just is, looking for work. Like, this is the opportunity. So, some work is disappearing, but then other opportunities present themselves, and this is it. So that really stood out to me. And then, I think the more we talk to experts in this space, like Brandon, who's been paying attention to the space for a while, it gets a little scary. Like I leave the conversation feeling a little bit more nervous than I did before the conversation. And, we know Brandon well, I trust him. And so to hear him at the end of the conversation saying, this can either go really well or it could be the end of humanity. And it's so black and white. And, he said he doesn't see anything falling in the middle. So, that stood out to me, made me a little anxious, again, only because I trust Brandon's expertise and his opinion. So that was unsettling, but also that's just where we are. So that stood out to me. The last thing I will mention is the adaptability piece that Brandon mentioned. It's just he's trying to make himself adaptable. So if it's like this door closes for him, then there are 3 other doors open because he continues to build his skills and to try new tools and just to develop himself as not just a writer, but as a problem solver. And I mean, we get to work with him, so we see it firsthand. You can't put him in a box. Like he does so many different things that we probably don't even know about. And I think he's going to be successful and will not have to be worried about finding a job or work because of that.
Yeah, when we talk about being worried about AI, I'm sort of in that same boat. Like to me, the tools aren't worrying. I don't worry about us losing our jobs. I think the worrisome things come on a societal level. And I know we've mentioned at some point we're going to have an episode on that where we can really dive into those negatives and the economics of it and whether or not AIs will kill us off. But in the meantime, I'm
but our
choosing.
businesses will be doing great.
Yeah,
our businesses will
be great.
Die off.
There's just in the meantime, I'm choosing to be pretty positive about the impacts that this is going to have on marketing and on business and even in our general lives that we live every day.
Yeah.
All right. We want to thank Brandon Burton for joining us on the podcast today to talk about using AI tools in your business, adaptability, and the future that this may impact for all of us. If you want to jump into that free 5-day AI copywriting challenge that Kira mentioned at the top of the show, visit thecopywriterclub.com/AI challenge. We're kicking that off on April 26th, so don't wait too long to get signed up.
And that's the end of this episode of AI for Creative Entrepreneurs, a Copywriter Club podcast produced by Brandon Burton, our guest from today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please visit Apple Podcast to leave your review of the show. We actually have not had our first review of this show, so if you're going to do it, please be nice. Or if you're catching this on YouTube, you can leave a comment below to let us know your favorite takeaway from this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.